Hi, my name is Sharon Shoemake. I'm state representative for the 42nd District, which includes Ferndale and most of Whatcom County. When we talk about tribal treaties, one of the things that's really important to understand is that before Washington could even be a state, a treaty between two sovereign nations had to be signed. Otherwise, we wouldn't have title to the land that we're standing on now. And so upholding that treaty is part of upholding our promises that our ancestors made. It wasn't just the tribes that signed that treaty, but it was our ancestors as well. And if we're going to be a nation that keeps its promises, that includes the Constitution, that includes the Bill of Rights, and that includes the Treaty of 1855.
Since time immemorial, we've been a hunting and gathering society, and our livelihood was hugely dependent upon the salmon. Up and down the coast, the tribes lived along the waterways where the salmon were on their migratory journey from the ocean up the rivers to spawn and give new life. The old people knew this, so they prepared themselves to harvest the salmon in the most plentiful places that could be. They traveled by canoe, and these canoes provided them with a means to become one with the waters and with the salmon and all living things. And when the newcomers came to this territory, that lifeway had changed dramatically.
At the signing of the treaty, there was a Lummi who was concerned. And when it was all finished and when it was signed, a Lummi yelled out. Because not just the signatories went, they brought children as witnesses, they brought members of Lummi Nation and from different village sites here, the islands, and went down and they were witnesses. But a Lummi spoke up there and yelled out from the crowd, will you remember these promises you have made to the Lummis here today? And Governor Stevens pointed at the mountain and he said, you see that mountain? That mountain is big. Then he pointed at the river. He said, you see that river? That river forever flows in one direction. Do you see the sea? The tide forever comes in and goes out. And these three that I mentioned here today will be the witnesses that guarantee the promises that I have made to you here today.
For some people, this area is just Washington and Oregon, Canada, and for us, it's a mixture of all that. We never had borders. Borders are so chaos, they're so new, and it brought on and made me think of that movie Lion King. Simba's dad is showing him his kingdom, his land, his Omaktanoch. He was telling Simba that your land is as far as you can see, all the land that the sun touches, and for for us, it's more of how far up that sacred path we can paddle. We've been here for so long, it's just home.
I feel guilty when I see young people that don't know, but it's partially my fault because I didn't teach them. It's partially my fault because I didn't share with them what I know. And so we have to take this time for people to get a better understanding of who we are, and the independent people of the United States. We have a treaty with the United States of America. And they got to remember that. That's the most important thing.
To me, the last great canoe journey occurred in 1855 when the tribes went to Mukilteo to sign the treaty with the newcomers, and they gave up the parts of their lifeway and moved to reservations. This act of assimilation took away a lot of culture of our people. Today it is being reborn through canoe journeys, and these things that were once done in our culture, once were relied upon on the waters, are being recognized once again.
January 22nd, 1855, my grandfather, back then, entered into a treaty along with more than a dozen other Lummi tribal leaders. They made their way down to Mukilteo. If you can imagine the weather today, it's blowing about 30, 35, 40, probably gusting 50. So if you can imagine being in one of our war canoes or one of our smaller canoes, making our way down there to get together with then Governor Stevens, governor of the Washington Territory. This wasn't a state yet. And the United States knew that and realized that in order for this to be done legally, a treaty needed to be entered into between two sovereigns. For all of Whatcom County and all of the islands, the Lummi Nation, as a sovereign, had to enter into a binding contract with the United States. Article 6 of the United States Constitution says a treaty is a supreme law of the land. So two sovereigns came together, negotiated a treaty. And at this time, obviously, we inhabited all of this land, these waters. This was our home, our land, since time immemorial. But knowing that things were moving west, there were going to be settlers coming in and a new world about to take place, our leaders foresaw the future, and rather than go to war, we entered into a peace treaty. This treaty included access to our usual and accustomed grounds. It secured our rights to fish. It wasn't granted to us. It's not a privilege. It's a right that was reserved. It's something that we have always done. So we reserved those rights with the exchange of all the land that was ceded. And as I shared with you, we have roughly 13,000 acres now of land where everything was Lummi Nation's. But as we negotiated this treaty, we included healthcare, fishing, hunting, education. Our education took place on the water. It starts from birth to adulthood, and then we all have a role. So this is a completely a complete change in our way of life as we've known it forever. So education was something that wasn't really understood by us at the time. We couldn't foresee what the future held in terms of education because it's completely different to us. We all had a purpose. Everybody had a purpose. Some were fishers, some were hunters, some were warriors. We all had a role. So this change took place, and we had a year to evacuate our villages and longhouses that have been a structure within this land and the islands forever. You know, these places belong to families, and my grandpa shared with me, my late grandfather, I overheard him talking at the breakfast table one morning, and it painted a picture for me. So if you can imagine January 22nd, 1856, a year after, canoes shackled together and taken away from their villages and brought to this new place we had to call home, the reservation. And some refused to leave. Some refused to leave their villages in San Juan, Orcas, and different places. And some married in with the settlers that came in. But they had to carry around a card saying they relinquished their Lummi rights, and they did. We're at 165 years this year on January 22nd, 2020. And a lot has changed. Our world and our way of life has completely been transformed in 6 generations. And it's still a struggle today to live in our reality because we're genetically different, but we're making progress. My great-grandmother died when I was 5. She was born in 1888, and then my great-grandfather, Watatlam, was born in 1892, and he too died when I was 5. So if you can imagine, I was one hug away from pre-contact life. They were raised by individuals who were here pre-contact. So that kind of puts it into perspective. When one might think the treaty was a long time ago, for us it wasn't. It was 6 generations, isn't many generations, and it was a whole new world. It was, in our eyes, in our belief, it's the way God created this place everything was provided. In our language, there was no word for famine, none. We didn't know what it was like to go hungry. The orcas, the salmon, everything was here. This garden was perfect, and it took care of us forever in the past. Since time immemorial, it took care of us. So today, the way we live, it's kind of a struggle. It's a challenge still to adapt to this new way of life. But we're making progress. And I think these conversations here today and the awareness of the true reality of what took place 165 years ago, it was an agreement between two sovereigns. And today, I'm the former chairman of Lummi Nation. My relationship is with the President of the United States, not the state, not the cities. Yes, we have partnerships with them. Yes, we need to work together, but my true relationship as a nation, as a sovereign, is up here with the President in the United States, the federal government, because it's these two sovereigns who came together and negotiated this real estate contract that goes into forever. It's not something that expires someday. The deal was done, and that's what a treaty is.
And that's what our old people, that's what our ancestors did for us. They were thinking of us. Our people were very smart, and they were thinking about us. This is why some of the things that we have in our treaty, hunting, gathering, fishing, education, these are some of the reasons, our old people were looking after us, and we weren't even here yet. Our old people went down to sign the treaty. Silik, Chawisu, Sasamten. All our old people, that's what they were doing.
So why is the treaty important for Whatcom County? I think I went into it a little bit, but every square inch of land that is farmed, every fish that is caught out there by a sports fisherman, every gallon of water that is used to drink, to shower, to all of these things were necessary and important to every citizen of what is now known as Whatcom County and the state of Washington. It was made possible by this treaty. So there's a perception that the treaty is important to only us, only Lummi Nation or a tribe who entered into the treaty, but really it's important to every single citizen here because it's what made it possible. And there's no rights of conquest. There's no conquer of the Lummi Indians and the tribes. It's two sovereigns came together, in our particular case in Whatcom County, and entered into this bilateral contract with one another into perpetuity, forever. And sometimes there's this perception, whether it's created from John Wayne movies or whatever the case may be, but that's not the truth. It's far from the truth. And I'm so grateful to the Ferndale School District for this long overdue opportunity to share the truth, because it's your truth just as much as it's our truth. It's important to know the truth, and important because we're partners, we're neighbors, we're friends, and it's really what we have here in Whatcom County is a unique setting. And some of us might take it for granted, but just so rich with culture, so rich with history, I think this is long overdue, and I'm very grateful that this is the beginning of a great future of teaching true history and understanding of this partnership, this relationship that we've had historically and moving into tomorrow. Ferndale in our language is Titisan, and in Ferndale there are many special places to us historically and still today. Some special places or sacred places to you might be, I'm not sure, the cemetery in Ferndale, the cemeteries up in Custer or Linden. We all have sacred places, and for us, just because there's 6 generations, 7, 8, 20, 50, 100 generations old, it doesn't eliminate the sacredness and significance. A cross and headstone doesn't define the value and importance of a cultural site and sacred site for us. And it wouldn't for yourself or your family and your future generations. Moving up into the future, you're probably 6 generations here. And as you move into 100 generations, your future generations shouldn't devalue what is sacred to your traditions and what is sacred today. So, like the Hagen's parking lot, it was shared with me that that's not just a parking lot, that's a village site, and was a village site. And there are many different village sites. Cherry Point, we all know, was a giant village site, an important place to us. Birch Bay, Cheltenham, which is Point Roberts, 155, 65 years ago, you would have seen more than 100 lummies with reef nets out there as far as the eye could see, harvesting the Fraser River salmon.
We believe that we are Tlactamish. We are the people, the survivors of the Great Flood. Okay, and we're still here. And we still practice our old ways the best we can, even though we did survive the boarding schools and the church schools. We still practice what we know. But the importance of the culture to our young ones is maintaining our identity as to who we are as a people. We are Tlactamish, but we come from all the Mish people. You see the surrounding tribes and bands around us, the Duwamish, the Skykomish, the Snohomish. All the Mish people are all the survivors of the Great Flood and the story that we had years ago. This is how important all of this is to us. This is why we're doing this, to help our young people get a better understanding of what happened in our past, to know where we're going in our future.
Sovereignty means that we, at Lummi Nation, we have our own laws. We have a clinic, and that we govern ourselves. And just like Uncle Bill said, that our treaty is an agreement between 2 governments, between the United States and the Lummi Nation. Our agreement is not with the city of Ferndale. It's not with the city of Bellingham. It's not with Whatcom County. It's not with the state of Washington. Our treaty is an agreement between the United States and the Lummi Nation.
You have to understand that when the treaty was negotiated, it was negotiated in the Chinook jargon. It wasn't negotiated in Clomichalson. It wasn't negotiated in Lachute. It wasn't negotiated in Helcamenum. Okay, there were many different languages that were spoken. The Chinook jargon was a language that was developed by the Hudson's Bay Company that with the fur traders, that's how they talked. And there was a lot of French language in that Chinook jargon, and that's how it was negotiated.
There's 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington state, but it was necessary because every square inch of land where what is now known as Washington state was owned by some indigenous tribe in that particular area. So these treaties were necessary in order for this state to become a state in the year that it became a state. So 1855, what year did Washington become a state? And this moment in time was necessary for us to have what we have today. And I envision at that time, it was probably a scary time for my leaders and for my ancestors. But today I envision my grandfather shook hands with Governor Isaac Stevens, and I do the same. And I share these times in my vision of what took place back then with today's governor, when working for my nation as the former chairman of Lummi Nation. And I let him know, I believe it's 24 governors ago, my grandfather shook hands with the then territory governor, and we're here trying to work together to uphold this treaty that was entered into. And we have a lot of work to do, but we have to remember that past. It was only 6-7 generations ago, and like I said, for more than 150 generations, we've farmed this land, and we entered into new partnerships with new societies and new people. We welcomed, we were very giving at the time, and welcoming and helpful. It's not an easy place to live, if you can imagine, without electricity. A lack of experience on fishing and hunting and things like that. So there is a deep history here, and a friendship 165 years ago with the Lummi people and original settlers. It's not often you witness or get to see what Ferndale and Lummi have, meaning there's not a lot of other places in this country where you have a rich historical culture like Lummi has, and it's just right across the bay or only a few minutes away, and we have that here. I'm thankful that this is being brought forward, and I think we need to go more in depth about our history between our families. I mean, there's a rich history between the families and the farmers and the fishermen, and a good history, and a lot of that's not known now, but it needs to be told. The story needs to be told. In our language, Estitimson. We are doing the best we can, and I think we can both each say that, Lummi Nation and Ferndale School District. This is long overdue, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share a few words. There are many others who have a deep, rich history, I think, to share with the district, and I look forward to that opportunity in the future, not only for myself, but for others, and just once again want to thank each and every one of you for taking this time to allow me to share a few words, and having an open heart and open mind to hear a little bit of history. Haishka.
Looking back at the last great canoe journey of our people, much was lost, and today is being reborn, recaptured, if you will, this life way of living on the water, understanding what the water does for our people, giving us life for the salmon that we receive, giving us life for the songs that we receive, giving us life for the understanding that our ancestors lived along these shores, and their spirit still lives today, and our children are recognizing that very thing.
CM nes Jalata CM na Ellis Downuk nas Cleat Quenisquel Aquaquino Squel CM to Kachnin to Schwalakwa it's all Lalo T Squachil Heichka CM Anuch Ait and Kachnin T Squachil CM Heichka CM Nequelia Niche and at Huivo I Hangasto and Qualilas eats Dalila Matamaquat T Squachil CM